And always if you're concerned about the recording, I can do away with it if need be. But it's for people who aren't here, but who are in our group have requested it that we do that. So we're going to get back to talking about meditation in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I want to launch the launch through this PowerPoint. And thank you again for participating in that meditation. Do we have that up on the screen? Are the slides up on the screen? Thank you. So we're about connecting healing and quality work in the classroom, which is absolutely possible to do. And it can be done by tuning. We're working from my book. By the way, when we get to the craft lesson tonight on sensory detail, really I'm doing for you what is in chapter 5 of the book. And here's a quote for a comment. We're not going to linger a long time over this quote, but but if there are a couple of people who would want to say something about it, that would be fine. I'll read it to you probably maybe twice. The mind creates the abyss, and the heart crosses it. And this is from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaji. and he might seem like he must be from some exotic location, and perhaps to us he would be, but he also works directly with Thomas Hubel, H-U-B-L, and Thomas Hubel is a leading trauma researcher. So I got this from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaji in that setting. And I'll tell you what happened to me with this quote. I read it and I thought, well, that's nice. and then I thought, well, it's kind of obvious. And then I came back to it and I thought, you know, it could be that's deep. That might be deep. That might be a deep explanation for something important in life. So that's where I've gotten to. And how about if maybe 2 people just say how this is hitting them, or what you appreciate about it, or what you understand it to be saying. Excuse me. The mind creates the abyss, and the heart crosses it. What are we learning? If we choose to learn from this, what are we learning about the mind and the heart?
For me, I would say that sometimes you can't understand things in maybe a logical or a rational way, but you can understand it through your heart in a feeling sense way, a way that often teachers and academics aren't used to kind of trusting. And so in a school environment, when I think about this, I think sometimes it means to kind of listen to your heart.
Thank you very much, Mary. I appreciate that. 1 or 2 more people, maybe. Even if you feel like you're just saying the obvious, that's welcome.
To me, I have a connection to this as a writer, and the way thoughts come, but it's the connective tissue of the heart that really makes the writing come alive. I don't know if that's making sense, but that's it. As soon as I read it, I went right to writing.
Makes very good sense. Thank you, Jill.
I was thinking of some students today that I was talking to who are struggling because they're behind because English is not their primary language, and how because of that and because of the gaps in their education, they've got, these gaps, but yet the teachers who can reach them personally beyond the classroom are the ones that are actually teaching them and that they're learning most from, and not feeling like they're less than the other students.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I appreciate that so much as well. I just want to have a practice where I bring you guys quotes and we talk about them and I listen to you. You always make such beautiful sense out of these. There's someone else with something on the end. Yeah, such wonderful sense. Is there someone else who has something on the tip of your brain? We could hear it. Okay. In Eastern wisdoms, and actually in all of the great spiritual practices around the world that I know of, the lecture is about following the heart. The lecture in that spiritual practice is about following the heart, that the heart is actually the best guide. And that's what you guys have, one of the things you've said. Okay. So this is actually the instructions for the meditation. And there's my visual of the forest. That doesn't have to be your forest. This slide was on meditation, was in your collection last week. They've done a lot of data collecting about meditation, and it always comes up so marvelously. And I would like us to keep in mind, I guess, two things. They're polar, by which I don't mean they're in opposition to one another. They're just two parts of a whole. And one part of the whole is that meditation is indeed a practice of the world's great spiritual traditions. It's a practice that comes to us from the world's great spiritual traditions. And I've got a Buddhism. It's you do it to connect to the present moment in a deep inhabiting way. In Hinduism, you do it to awaken the third eye, which is the eye of the soul, so that you'll see others through with your soul instead of just with your intellect. And in Christianity, it travels under different names. The Dominicans, I think it is, who call it the prayer of inner quiet. And in Christianity, it's practiced by assuming an attitude of prayer and then not asking for anything. You just wait, you just notice, you just attend to what the universe is ready to tell you. But the other pole is, and I'm going to invite Jennifer to talk about this in a moment, is it is entirely appropriate to offer it in schools and in educational settings as a secular practice. And that's probably how it can be received. And so meditation is a relaxation process. Meditation is a way to go deeper into your thoughts and into your heart thinking. And meditation is a way to pause so that you can see more clearly. And you see how I'm using language that has no direct spirituality to it. Here are some of the benefits that are researched. I'll just let you look at that page for a moment. If something jumps out at you, say it out loud.
Increased creativity. I have not heard that before.
Okay, good.
Increased memory.
Yeah. And reduced stress, couldn't we all use that? Here are some researched conclusions about school. And I'm going to invite Jennifer has used meditation in educational settings, and I'm just going to invite her to do about 5 minutes for us right now. I hope that's okay with everyone else. And Jennifer, I've already apologized to her several times for how short the time is.
No, it's fine. That's fine. So I think it started probably almost 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. We had an option for our evaluation. Sorry, I'm getting over some bronchitis. we had an option for our evaluation. If we had been teaching for a certain number of years and had received good evaluations, that we could embark on a study for the year and collect data and sort of present it at the end, write up a little, reflection on what happened. So 4 of us from all over our district, I teach in the Ann Arbor Public Schools in Michigan. 4 of us decided to get together and look into how mindfulness, which is just what we call it in school, how mindfulness can help students, especially kids who are dealing with outside issues, things that we can't control, that they can't control. So we read this book by Daniel Reckstoffen, and I've read lots since then. I've been doing yoga for about 15 years, and I do a lot of mindfulness work. I'm a 3rd order Benedictine. There's a lot of meditational layers in my life. And what we did was we just read through this book, and at the end it had some specific exercises to do with students. And as soon as I'm done talking, I'll put the name and the author of the book in the chat. And there are lots of them as of now. This sort of exploded. So what I did was take 5 to 10 minutes once a week. And we do it very systematically throughout the year. So we start with an anchor breath, learn about belly breathing, learn about how to do a body scan and relax your body. And then from then on, we go into lots of different ones, one of which is the one that we did tonight, the loving kindness meditation. Sometimes I'll just play music and let them relax for a little bit. It gives them this little oasis for them to know that on Wednesday, when they come in, instead of our 10 minutes of independent reading, we're going to do mindfulness. And a student, and then of course I took notes, and students after probably 6 weeks were started to ask or would remind me if I forgot to put it up on the board on Wednesday that it's not reading day, Mrs. Walsh. It is time to do mindfulness. And I had a student come back once and she goes, I really missed your class because I really missed that mindfulness. And she came back and I said, I gave you those tools. I'm giving you tools to use. I said, you can do it at any time. She goes, I know, but it was just easier when we did it once a week. So at the end, we ask kids, do you feel like these are skills that you can take with you? And of course, a lot of them said yes. I noticed this year, going back to doing it after an entire year of virtual teaching, so first of all, they're coming back with many more pounds of baggage than when they left us a year and a half ago. And they are having difficulty settling down this year. They don't want to close their eyes. They don't want to look down. A lot of them will stare straight at me. And so I've kept at it, maybe not as rigorously as I would have. My fun thing was about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a student. We have a fairly large Indian population in Ann Arbor. And because it's rooted in Eastern religion, Eastern thought, the mom sent me a bell with a little pillow, or a singing bowl with a little pillow and so I have all the accoutrement for they respond to the bell. They know that it's time to put their heads down, put their feet flat, and try and relax. At first, I tried to get them to sit up, like Richard was saying. I was trying to get them to sit, with a tall back, and some of them will do that, but some of them just want to put their heads down and sort of tune the world out for a little while. So that's what I've done in my classroom. It's been amazing. Even, kids you don't think or kids you think are too tough to sort of settle in and do something. And the first couple days, everybody's looking around to see who's closing their eyes. And so it is a process, and every year it's a process, but I definitely see benefits to it.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
And we'll bring you back for an encore.
Okay.
And at that point, people can ask you questions and we'll have a little more discussion too.
Okay.
But in a very short time, you've given us a whole little variety of things we could do and things you do. And I really like the array of, sometimes it can just be you relax with your eyes closed, or sometimes it's just music, there is a saying we have in mindfulness work, and it goes like this: what you practice grows stronger. What you practice grows stronger. If you don't practice it, it's not going to grow stronger. But if you do practice it, you can count on it. It will strengthen. Thank you again, Jennifer. So we're tuning writing workshop, and we're thinking about shepherding students toward learning instead of just giving them a lesson. And the tuning involves mindfulness practices, which we've been talking about. And by the way, mindfulness practices aren't a part of everybody's trauma-informed practices. But in the book that we're working from, the Mindful Writing Workshop, there really are two big parts. And one part are these mindfulness practices, which we have a high value on. Thomas Hubel says mindfulness practices are essential. And then we have trauma-informed pedagogy. And a key insight, or a key perception about trauma-informed pedagogy is we want to be scaffolding and coaching, building scaffolds for student learning, co-problem solving and coaching instead of judging and correcting. And so last week, this is Richard's version of what we did. And I want to particularly look at the orange block. So we talked about utilizing the respect agreement and the peak at the front end, on the front side, and the PQS protocol on the far side, on the back, to provide an underlayer of safety and kindness and to build a cocoon of safety. You may not be able to make the student's whole life safe. You may not even be able to make the whole school safe, but if you can make a safe classroom, that is a mighty and wonderful thing. Now we're working from Susan Craig's book, Trauma Sensitive Schools here, and we're picking up 3 more qualities. One is that when we teach a lesson, there's going to be doing involved. The students aren't just going to listen and go home or listen and take notes. They're going to do something. And there's also going to be a dialogic quality to the teaching, a thoughtful interaction. Not the teacher asks the question and the students give an answer, but a thoughtful interaction. So there's 1 and 2. And 3, there's going to be a what, why, how to the lesson. And you might think everybody could benefit from knowing what, why, and how are we doing this lesson. And I'm sure that's true. But in fact, there's a kind of block in students who've experienced trauma, or at least often in students who've experienced trauma, that prevents them from connecting. If you just start with, here's the lesson for today, and here is point 1 and point 2. But if you offer a what, why, how entry into this lesson, it opens the door for them. So what's the step of learning we're talking about? What does it look like? Why is this important? And how do you do it? How is it done? And that's what we're gonna follow these 3 steps tonight, and we're gonna work on the craft of sensory detail in relation to our life maps. And it's going to be simple. And once again, I'll walk you into it and do it with you. And so now we're doing a lesson that I have often done with students of all ages. I've done it with teachers in professional development. I've done it with first graders. I've done it with undergraduates and middle schoolers and high schoolers. And this is how I do it. So today we're going to be talking about sensory detail. The lesson is on sensory detail as one of the craft steps you can take in writing. And what is sensory detail? Well, it's when you put in the eyes, ears, taste, touch, and smell part of what you're talking about. What is it? What are the sounds of what you're talking about, and what are the sights, and so forth? And in addition to these five senses, there are visceral sensations, which is the body's response. When you see a romantic partner walking toward you and your heart begins to race, that's a visceral response. When you see your boss and you have a sudden headache across the brow, that's a visceral response, and so forth. And there are kinesthetic sensations, which is, you know whether your body is at rest or in motion. And if you're walking, you know whether you have an even or an uneven gait, and so forth. So there are these kinds of sensations. Now, that's what we're talking about. And why are we talking about it? We are talking about sensory detail really for two special reasons. And one is you have started a piece of writing from your life map, and we want people to think that writing is good. When they read this, we want them to see that it's good writing. And I can honestly tell you, as a longtime teacher and writer, that there is no more direct step toward making your writing seem good and making your writing be good for a reader than sensory detail. If there's one thing you could do, it would be sensory detail. Now, why is that? I'm going to give you a little bit more about why. The reason that works so well is because of this. When you switch over from just kind of talking about something to giving the sensory details of it, the reader begins to experience what you're talking about. They begin to live what you're talking about, and that connects them to your piece and it makes them care about it. So that's why sensory detail is important enough to teach about. I'm going to give you this little extra teaching that I got from Flannery O'Connor, a famous writer. And Flannery O'Connor, sitting with a friend of hers on a porch, Flannery's porch in Georgia, talking about writing one day, they decided that a writer should give 3 sensuous strokes. That is 3 different senses of the 5 senses, if you really want a reader to experience what you're talking about. So we have eyes, ears, taste, touch, and smell. And Flannery O'Connor thinks we need at least 3 of those in order to truly get a reader into the experience of what we're talking about. She said otherwise we're making them handicapped. So we're going to turn to mentor texts, which is what a good writing workshop teacher does in order to show how you do something. We use mentor texts. I'm going to model with a couple quickly, and you're going to then help me in a dialogic way by looking at a couple of mentor texts yourself. So there's going to be a little dialogue. And here's the first mentor text. It's from A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And by the way, these will be young people's books and adult books and so forth. And here's how it goes. The window rattled. This is, oh, by the way, this is like not the first page, but in the first couple of pages of the book. And Meg is in her attic bedroom. And the wind is blowing outside. And her father has already been kidnapped by the bad guys. And so there's a lot for her to be worried about. And Madeleine L'Engle wants us to experience her worry. And so the scene in Meg's bedroom goes like this. The window rattled madly in the wind, and she pulled the quilt up close about her. Curled up on one of her pillows, a gray fluff of a kitten yawned, showing its pink tongue, tucked its head under again, and went back to sleep. I'm going to walk you through the senses in this as I see them. The window rattled madly in the wind is sound, isn't it? And she pulled the quilt up close about her is touch, isn't it? And curled up on one of her pillows, a gray fluff of kitten yawned, showing its pink tongue, tucked its head under, and went again and went back to sleep. That's visual, isn't it? You might be able to hear the cat yawn almost, but it's visuals. So what I have found about the Flannery O'Connor rule, the 3 different senses, is that every great writer I read seems to know that rule. They seem to know that rule. And so here, Madeleine L'Engle, in only 2 sentences, has 3 different senses. The window rattled madly in the wind, sound. Pulled the quilt up close about her, touch. And curled up on one of the pillows, the gray fluff of is sight. And so she has three different senses. And I think that's why we are drawn right into this moment with Meg. And by the way, as a two for the price of one kind of lesson, Madeline L'Engle, who I think is a brilliant writer, gives us an additional little tip here. And I think her tip to us as writers is, if you want people to see something, tell them what color it is. Tell them what color it is. So this is a gray kitten with a pink tongue. And I think maybe that's why we see it. So here's another one that's a little complicated, and I'm going to do it for you, and I'll try to do it really quickly, and then I'm going to ask you to do something. Okay. This is from a book called The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. It's about a Native American tribe and the horses that they keep. And this young girl loves the horses so much and knows the horses so well that they make her the one who is tending to the horses. And here is the little girl one day. One hot day when the sun was overhead, she felt sleepy. She spread her blanket and lay down. It was nice to hear the horses eating and moving slowly among the flowers. Soon she fell asleep. A faint rumble of distant thunder did not waken her. Angry clouds began to roll across the sky with lightning flashing in the darkness beneath. But the fresh breeze and scent of rain made her sleep soundly. So I'm going to walk you through this again in my teacher way. One hot day is touch. When the sun was overhead, which is sight, she felt sleepy, which might be visceral, mightn't it? She kind of felt heavy. She spread her blanket, which might be visual, and lay down, which probably is touch. It was nice to hear the horses eating and moving slowly among the flowers. So she uses the word hear, her, and isn't that a kind of a really nice sentence? It is such a quiet day that you can hear the horses eating. Beautiful, I think. So then the faint rumble of distant thunder is sound. Angry clouds rolling across the sky is sight. Lightning flashing is sight. But then the fresh breeze is touch. And the scent of rain is the sense of smell for the first time. So I think there are four senses in here in just two short paragraphs. Okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pass this one off to you. Would two people volunteer to be the interpreters of this passage? And then you'll just jump in and kind of try to do what Richard just did with those other passages, find the senses and the three different senses. So could I get two volunteers, and you'll just collaborate in front of us and we'll help you out.
Is it okay if we read it first?
Yeah, how about if I read it? Yeah, would somebody read it aloud?
I can read it since I'm
Great.
unmuted.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Up North at the Cabin by Marcia Wilson Chall. The boat roars forward. The tow line snaps tight. I leap from the water, riding the waves. Lean back, they scream. How much, I think. Then I smack the water like an angry northern pike. I fall 3 times, a flip, a somersault, the splits. Want to try again, they ask. Papa skims the silver water on only one ski. Yes, I shout.
It was Denise, right? Yeah, thank you, Denise. Do you mind being one of our volunteers? Would that be okay? And we'll go ahead. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
unless someone else would like to participate,
Okay.
that would be
Just
fine.
need a couple of people quickly. We're just practicing together. If we were in the classroom, by the way, I would let the students work in pairs and do this by themselves and then come back to the whole group. But we don't have the time or circumstance for that. So I'm just counting on your teacher educator bravery here.
I'll do it.
Okay, who was that?
That's Stephanie.
Okay, Stephanie and one other. Denise, will you be Stephanie's backup?
Sure.
Okay, let's jump right in, Stephanie. And
Well, just in the first 2 lines, I can hear the boat motor roaring and feel the tightness of the tow line as it snaps.
Yes, great.
And then halfway down, I love the metaphor. I smack the water like an angry northern pike.
Uh-huh.
So I feel that.
we're filing that away for the metaphor lesson too.
Yeah.
Thanks. Those are great. Keep going if you want. Mhm. And also jump in, Denise.
Oh, okay. So she can see Papa skimming the silver water on only one ski, so that's sight.
Right.
And she can hear her team yelling, "Lean back,"
Mhm.
whoever they is.
Right.
And that's the sound. And then there's also the feeling of riding the waves
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
and the feeling of the flip, the somersault, and the splits.
Right. Yes. There's the feeling of that because she's experiencing it. If we're watching her, I guess we're seeing it, but there wouldn't be a right or wrong there. It's probably both. Thank you. You guys are doing wonderfully with this. How many of the senses do we have? Name off.
Everything except for taste. She doesn't eat the water.
Okay. Wonderful.
But she might, I guess, if she were to take a bad spill, she could eat it. But it doesn't seem like that's what happened.
Right. And did you want to say anything, Stephanie, that you didn't get to say?
Well, I was just looking for visceral or kinesthetic sensations. But I would have to look through it again. I just wondered.
Yeah. And those
I think the movement, her moving and flipping and smacking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be kinesthetic maybe, huh? Yeah, and visceral and kinesthetic aren't always included. So I'm glad you brought it up. But when they often are pretty penetrating. They often are very helpful. So thank you for bringing that up. So here's Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. And if you just read across from left to right and from left to right, you'll be reading it out. Is there somebody who'd read it for us?
I can read it.
Okay.
My mother arrives in the middle of the night, and sleepily we pile into her arms and hold tight. Her kiss on the top of my head reminds me of all that I love, mostly her. It's late winter, but my grandfather keeps the window in our room slightly open so that the cold, fresh air can move over us. My mother tucks us back into our bed, whispering, "We have a home up north now."
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And I don't mean to snare you the way I did Denise exactly, or maybe I do, but would you be one of the interpreters for this? And could we get a second one?
Sure, I will do that.
Okay, and somebody to help Jennifer? Please. Jump right in. Just going to be Jennifer's support. She's our point person on this.
Do you want me to just go ahead and start? And if someone wants to jump in?
Yep, that's great.
Okay. So mother arriving in the middle of the night is sight or visceral feeling. Pile into her arms and hold tight is touch. Kiss on the top of the head is touch. Love is one of those visceral feelings. Let's see. Grandfather keeps the window in our room slightly open in the winter. That's being able to feel. And cold, fresh air over us is feeling. Tucking us back into our bed is also feeling. And we have a home up north now. I think that would be visceral based on what I remember about the book. It seems like a lot of the feelings or a lot of the sensory images deal with feeling and visceral.
Okay, thank you very much. And how about if somebody else does jump in, please? I'm sure somebody out there has been noticing something about this.
I think, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think also on top of that visceral feeling at the end, there's the hearing, because the mom is whispering
right.
to them.
She says that. Yep. Good point. And so what senses do we have here? just to review.
Sight,
Yeah.
touch, sound.
Hmm.
Wasn't there in visceral, or maybe it's
Piling, I think, what was visceral? What did you remember? What visceral thing?
The love and the kissing and,
Okay, the feeling of love kind of flowing.
right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Laura. And I would just like to just in passing here, note how much touch there is in this, and point out or remind us that touch is the most intimate of the five senses. If a stranger walks up beside you on the street and says, "Hey, it's time for you to cross the street," or "Hey, isn't it a nice day?" You'll be fine with that probably. But if the stranger walks up beside you and they put their arm around you and it's resting on your shoulder and they say, "Hey, isn't it a nice day?" You may object to that because it's too intimate, isn't it? It's too intimate for a stranger. So touch is intimacy, and this is a passage full of intimacy. Thank you so much for your interpreting of this. We're each going to take 5 minutes to write a scene. This is another passage. So we're going to have the doing part of this now, and my students and I do this. We're going to take about 5 minutes or 8 minutes, maybe more like 8. And I'm going to ask you, there are a lot of different ways to include sensory detail, but I'd like you to try to include it the way that each of these writers did. And by that I mean, they tried to write a 1 or 2 paragraph, a bunch of senses about one particular moment. All of these senses occurred in one moment, when the mother came into the room, or when Meg was sitting in her bedroom, or when the girl was sleeping beside the horses. All of these are, they're trying to give us one special moment. And that's what I'd like you to do in kind of a long paragraph. Now, you probably, and it's going to be from the topic of your life map paper, if you have that topic with you this evening. But if you're here this evening without a life map, it could be a sensory detail paragraph or 2 about just some important topic in your life. Now, what might you choose to write about? You could write, how did it begin? When did you notice this beginning, whatever it was? Or it could be about a worst or best moment. What was the worst moment of this struggle? Or what was the best moment of this happiness? Or it could be about a turning point, when things turned for the better or for the worse. Or it might be the kind of thing where if you just characterize how it was in a kind of typical moment, that would be a lot. So I'd like you to choose one of these or something else of your choosing, and you have about 5 minutes. And you can use scratch paper always. I always have my notebook handy. So I'm going to grab my notebook, but if you use computer paper or an envelope, that's perfectly all right. And now you've got 5 minutes, and you're not going to try to introduce it. You're not going to explain about it. You're not going to conclude. It doesn't matter whether this is near the beginning or near the end of what you're talking about. You're going to jump into and you're going to revisualize one moment of this experience. When did you notice it beginning? Or what was a turning point? Or what was a worst or best moment, and so forth. Choose a moment and try to get at least half a notebook page of sensory detail on that moment, thinking of 3 different senses. If you have trouble thinking of a sense, switch over to a different one of the eyes, ears, taste, touch, smell. Okay, and if you have a question while you're doing it, just speak up. So my life map topic I checked was about my mother, and I have a free write about her. And so now I'm going to write a moment about my mother, or me and my mother. Okay. try to push it just a little bit. Try to maybe check yourself and try to get at least three different senses. And if you kind of run out, you could pause and think about, so what else that we might have noticed with a different sense of mind. And then if you get done, feel free to stop. The rest of us will be with you in a moment. Now you're trying to write to a stopping place. You can write another sentence or two. Now try even harder to come to a stopping place. And if you're still writing as we're shifting into sharing, that is okay. Sometimes you get onto something and you need to be writing it. Just look back. We're going to actually get maybe one person at least to share their piece, one brave person. But even before we do that, just look back over this lesson for a moment and where you are right now, and talk about, I guess, this experience of writing this moment and whether it went okay for you, or there were some difficulties, or you have some questions. Or you have an insight you'd like to share. Something you're seeing more clearly about sensory detail, or
I'm a fan of 3 also. I love 3.
uh-huh.
So I really liked having that number and having that as a guide for thinking about the way that I might put this piece together. So
Uh-huh.
that was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for saying that. One other thought would be great.
I thought it was much easier to do something that was an experience I'd had, which is what we started with last week,
Uh-huh.
because I could visualize myself in that situation, and it was easier to bring up sensory detail in the writing.
Uh-huh. And who is this speaking? I'm sorry, I lost you.
Is Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a point that would be worth quite a bit more exploration. I'm not sure that there's any book in the Barnes and Noble bookstore that was written by an author who thought, well, I guess I'll just write about this. I don't know much about it, but I think I'll just write about it. And yet in school, I just am fearful and concerned and maybe even upset about how much of the time students are being asked to write about things they don't know about or care about. And that is an upset of the apple cart of what writing is. I think. That's not what writing is. I don't think. How about if somebody, so thanks for your patience with that little lecture. How about if somebody shares their sensory moment with us, please? And we will just tell you what we remember from it and maybe ask a couple of questions that you want to answer.
I'd be happy to share mine.
Okay. Go right ahead, please.
The smell of the wood stove and the fire was strong on his red flannel jacket. He carried the whole house on his shoulders. The heaviness of it made somewhat easier by leaning his weight into the gnarled walking stick that he pressed into as he walked on our forest path. The children watched the window every evening for the sight of him, the sister whispering to her brother, "There he is," as they leaped into action, silently crossing the path on winged feet, leaves not making a sound as they sneaked up behind him. Our friend Alan, so lost in thought that he didn't remember the way that the children surprised him, leaping from behind the downed ash, startling his walking stick into the air, and all three of them laughing as it crashed down into the laurel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise, for I'm so glad I asked. What do we remember? It's very difficult to remember something you just heard read aloud once. And sometimes we actually just do it twice. And I always say, it's okay to say, please read that again. It's always okay for anyone in the room to say, would you please read that again? But anyway, what can you remember from Denise's? A word, a detail, a part?
The red flannel shirt and the walking stick.
Uh-huh.
Really well described.
Yes. And doesn't that color work marvelously, just like Madeline Google said it would? Others
And
think-
kind of pressing into the walking stick. I think there was sort of a kinesthetic experience.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I like the way he carried the house on his back.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Sinead. A couple of others if you have them. Anything else you remember from it?
I love the visual of his walking stick being startled into the air. And then was it laughter that ensued after?
Uh-huh.
At least that's what I pictured.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I love how the children say, "There he is." And it reminds me of something that some of these other writers just did that we looked at. She whispered, we have a place up north now. They say, here he comes. That's really a kind of a powerful little move, isn't it? And I remember how it starts with the smell of the fire on his shirt. I think that's what it is. And how about two questions? What are you curious to know? Denise is not going to reply to these questions, and that's the way I do it in class, because the function of the questions isn't to get a talk going. The function of the questions is to give the writer something more to think about when they go back to their writing. They don't have to answer our questions in their writing, but they have something a little more to think about, and they know what some readers are curious about. So let's have two different people ask a question, please.
I'm so curious about Alan, our friend,
Uh-huh.
and this, waiting for him and the joy around him. I would hope that this story would have more Alan.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. One more?
Yeah, I wondered about him being lost in thought. I was wondering what Alan thinks about,
And who was that?
That's Mary.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Yep. Thank you. And one more question. What are you curious or even confused about? Of course, she just shared this little bit. So of course we have a lot to be curious about.
Interested in his journey, like the purpose of his journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, what did they have yeah, what was the purpose of that journey? It's about a journey. Thank you, Sinead. And I guess,
Thank you all actually for that. Alan would be honored to hear your thoughts.
and thank you for that comment. Yeah, isn't it wonderful to hear your piece talked about that way, to hear your people talk about it that way. I would be, this is a positive, I think, loving scene, but like, who was it who asked about Alan? Was it, who asked about Alan a moment ago?
It might have been me, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I think I have Mary's question. Although I'm wondering who Alan is, and are his thoughts troubled in some way? Is there a trouble in Alan's thoughts, or not? Just what are? So I have Mary's question. Thank you. Somebody like a last word on this?
I just
So I
have to
have-
jump.
So go ahead. I have a short question. What if you have kids who, because of the nature of their life maps and what they've chosen to write about, what if they don't feel comfortable sharing that out loud?
They don't have to. We are inviting them to put these different categories on their life map, right? When we do the map, that include categories of joy and success and sorrow and loss. But they don't have to put all those categories on their life map if they don't want to. It's an invitation. And then the invitation to write is an expectation that they will write. That's a task that's not an invitation that we want them to decline unless they feel at a loss, in which case we will help them. But then the invitation to share is just an invitation. So if you have a small groups, which I often teach as writing circles, and the function of the writing circles is to share and help each other, then someone cannot share for a fair amount of time if need be. But in that case, I would take them aside, not as so much as if they're being a problem, but I would say, look, your group isn't going to be able to help you if you don't share with them at some point. So maybe you could find a part of this that you could share at least. So that kind of thing. But anyway, it's an invitation, and thank you for bringing that up. And I'm going to move toward closing. And although we are a couple minutes over time, we're not as much over time as I have normally been. So here's the positive response protocol, which I'm reminding you of. I would love it. I think it would be wonderful for our little community, I think, if either tonight or tomorrow, you would do a see, think, wonder about this evening's work. This is what stands out for me about the evening's work and what seems maybe important or helpful. And here's what I think about that. And here's what I wonder about that. If you do that in your notebook and then share it in our activity feed and our deeper dive, some of you did that this past week in the past couple of sessions, and it's been marvelous, really. So if you would do a see, think, wonder, and how about if maybe two people share what they might write as their see? What from this evening's work particularly stands out for you or feels helpful to you? I can get two people to testify. You don't have to do the whole see, think, wonder, but you look back over this evening, and as you think of yourself beginning to write a see, think, wonder, what do you think your see might be about?
Well, I really like when we're working, especially with like higher level high schoolers, that not just to tell them to include the 5 senses, but to teach them about visceral and kinesthetic language. Just kind of push them to go a little deeper with that, I think.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. We get one other.
I think I'll say a wonder, if that's okay, which is that I was wondering, because we did a visualization meditation at the beginning,
Mhm.
if that really influenced our writing, because we were already like sort of in this imaginative space
Mhm.
that we were practicing by picking up a stone from a large rock.
Right.
And, that I just am curious about that and
Yeah.
how that impacts writers.
Very observant of you, Denise.
Oh, thanks.
I told you a story, didn't I?
Mm.
Yeah, and that was our meditation. Yes. And Thomas Hubel and many others, one of the reasons they're so committed to meditation is because it is a pathway. It's a pathway to having your mind work in ways that can serve you. So thank you for calling us back to that at the last moment. So I like this. I sometimes talk in professional development, and this isn't exactly professional development because we're more a little community of educators. But I say our teacher task is to build bridges and offer coaching. We're not observing the students. We are helpers. And my sort of metaphor for this or example is when a young child is learning to cross the street, we do not say, look both ways and good luck. We hold their hand and walk beside them. And so I think when students are new to a task, if it feels like we're almost like doing the task for them or sitting beside them and kind of we're doing 75% of it and they're doing 25%, I think that's perfectly all right. That's how you learn to do something, I think. Your mindfulness task for next time is walking meditation. Laura and I got to see Thich Nhat Hanh do walking meditation in Chicago with his monks and nuns. And it was a lovely experience. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. And walking meditation is simply taking a walk and noticing, trying to deeply inhabit the moment of the walk and be gentle with yourself by especially noticing beauty. Look for any little or larger beauty and write 2 sentences about that, either on your walk or when you get home. And these slides will be up in the next few days on our activity feed. I hope you will write about that meditation thing, Denise. And I hope as many of you as can will do the See, Think, Wonder. It's been such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for being here. And may our path be lit by wisdom, and may our hearts be touched by compassion. Namaste, my dear sisters. See you soon.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Jay, thank you.
See you soon.
Take care.
Keep in touch, Sinead.
Okay. I will surely.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Lovely to be
Thank you.
here. Mhm.
We want to stop recording.
Yes, can you do that?
Can you do that?
I'm sure I can.
I'll just end.